Good morning, and thank you for joining us for another session in our 10-minute Wellbeing Tips for Managers series. Today, we're returning to the leadership support building block of wellbeing and our theme of becoming a better leader. And specifically today, we're talking about becoming a learning leader. John F. Kennedy believed that leadership and learning are indispensable, and many leadership thought leaders and researchers have confirmed that the best leaders never stop learning. Now, as we've all experienced in the last few years, the pace of change in healthcare has been so extreme that we have had no choice but to keep learning and changing in order to adapt to our new reality in healthcare. But there's another reason to be a learning leader, and that is that learning is good for us. More than 200 years ago, Voltaire wrote, "I have chosen to be happy because it's good for my health." Modern research supports this, that there is a connection between happiness and health. And it also suggests that when people are lifelong learners, they're happier. And if you need another reason to be a learning leader, remember that lifelong learning is good for our brain health. This morning, we're going to learn why learning is good for our personal well-being, how having a learning leader impacts a team's well-being, and what we know about learning leaders and how they lead. And then finally, we'll touch on how to build a learning habit in your team and at work. So let's start by looking more closely at learning and your own well-being. Having opportunities for learning, development, and growth can build our personal sense of meaning and purpose. It can increase our self-confidence and our self-esteem. It can even support social connection to other people and expand our sense of what is possible in our lives. So people who are actively engaged in learning and personal or professional development report feeling more hopeful, better about themselves in general, and more able to manage stress. So let's now look at what well-being can do for your team. So the power of this is that it impacts several aspects of our well-being. So when we model and encourage continuous learning, we create a learning norm that supports the members of our team to embrace their own learning journey. People who are actively engaged in learning and professional development and growth are much more likely to find their work engaging, be more engaged with their teams, and more open to considering new ways of doing things, which is really important as healthcare keeps changing. Learning leaders are also usually relational leaders, and this fosters a sense of social connection and well-being, especially when we are able to create shared opportunities for learning and growth. And then finally, having a learning mindset and the support of a learning culture also supports our emotional well-being, our emotional agility, our adaptability, and ultimately our resilience. Being a learning leader goes far beyond our ability to learn new things. It's a mindset that influences our way of being and our way of doing things. So research suggests that while learning leaders may appear very different in some ways, they share several important characteristics. These are, they are curious, humble, relational and collaborative, and they have a tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty. So let's look at these one by one. There are so many wonderful quotes about the value of curiosity, but this one by Eleanor Roosevelt is probably my favorite. "I think at a child's birth, if a mother could ask a fairy godmother to endow it with the most useful gift, that gift would be curiosity." Throughout our lives, curiosity is the engine that fuels our ability to learn, grow, survive, and thrive. So let me pause to ask you to reflect for a moment on that. What are you curious about? Really curious about? And how does that feel to be curious? Many people argue, and I confess I am absolutely one of them, that I find curiosity really energizing and motivating. And I think many of us would agree that curiosity gives us an energy boost. And frankly, after the years we've had, energy boosts would be good for us. So let's now look at humility. Now, it's interesting. I also like this statement by C.S. Lewis. He says, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking about yourself less. So learning leaders are both confident and courageous leaders, but they're also humble and curious leaders. They're able to balance their confidence and courage to act or solve problems independently with the humility and the curiosity to engage and learn from other people. They know that heroic leadership, or counting on individual heroes to find a solution and save the day, is not effective. If you're interested in learning more about an alternative to heroic leadership, I recommend Kim Barnes's book, Beyond Heroes. The opposite of heroic leadership is humble leadership. Organizational culture expert Edgar Schein has written extensively about the importance of humble leadership and humility, in fact, and I highly recommend his book on humble leadership. Schein emphasizes that humble leaders are we-focused. They're collaborative, they're constantly curious, and they are deeply relational. So, what does being curious, humble, and relational look like behaviorally? Listening leaders hold space for others to talk and share ideas. They listen to understand, not to interrupt or to fix. They have an open mind, and they're committed to getting things right rather than being right. They admit mistakes and limitations, and they welcome feedback. They embrace differences and diverse ideas. They're patient, and they can tolerate uncertainty, and they build learning cultures around them. Another important attribute of learning leaders is empathy. Empathy and humility, combined with deep listening to understand, create an environment in which everyone feels welcomed and valued. That increases our sense of belonging and social connection and our investment in improving our work environment together. Then the outcomes, of course, are far-reaching professionally and personally, and ultimately they enhance our well-being. So let's move now from theory to action. Yes, it's true that every moment of every day brings opportunities to learn something we've never known before. But it's also true that most of us are so busy that we won't engage in continuous learning if we don't plan to do it. And that brings us to the idea of developing habits. So if we want to continue to learn as a leader, we have to make it a habit. So how do we build a learning habit? It starts by embracing curiosity, identifying something that you want to learn and also why learning that will be important to you. And be specific about what you want to learn and how you want to do it. So resolutions like read more or learn new things are just going to be too vague. So I suggest you set a measurable goal, such as I'm going to read 2 hours a week, or I'm going to spend 10 minutes a day learning something more about my team members. Then schedule the times to do this on your calendar. Now, we can also consider using a behavioral cue to practice learning, such as every time I walk back from the restroom, I will stop and interact with a team member. Or while I drive to work, I will listen to a leadership podcast. Monitor your efforts, what's working for you, what's not. And remember, it's not about perfection, it's just about progress. Above all, please never be afraid to try new things and make some mistakes. It's all part of life and it's all part of learning. So here are a few questions that you could try out with your team to encourage their learning. And I recommend by starting to reflect on their past learning. So, for example, what are we able to do now that we weren't able to do 3 months ago? What did we learn together that made this possible? How did we support each other's learning and growth? And if we look back 3 months from now, what else would you hope that we would have learned together? And then, of course, how can we make that happen? And that brings us to our tips for today. Agenda tip 46 is to add regular opportunities for team members to share their curiosity questions with you. And manager tip 42, encourage your team to share what they're learning and do the same. And notice the energy when people share their learning. Next week, we'll be exploring the importance of providing and receiving support. And as always, we encourage you to share the resources or to explore and share the resources at Healthy at Hopkins and the Office of Wellbeing.